My name is Henry Collins, and I never imagined my life would end up like this. Sitting by a cracked window in a quiet old-age home, watching the sun fall behind rusted gates, wondering how the people I raised could forget I even existed. If someone had told me years ago that my own children would drop me off here like a worn-out piece of furniture, I would have laughed. I would have said, my kids love me too much for that. But life, it seems, enjoys proving us wrong in the cruelest ways possible. I wasn't a perfect father, but I was a present one. After my wife, Martha, passed away 5 years ago, I tried my best to hold the family together. She was the heart of our home, and when she was gone, everything felt like it was unraveling. My 2 kids, Emily and Thomas, were my only reason to keep going. Emily, my eldest, was 34. A corporate manager, always busy, always on the phone, even at dinner. Thomas was 30, chasing business ventures and investments I could never quite understand. I used to think their independence was something to be proud of. Now I realize it was the beginning of their distance. After Martha's death, the house became too quiet. I used to sit in her rocking chair, holding her old scarf, just to feel close to her. Sometimes I'd talk to her photo, updating her on the kids, pretending she could hear me. She always wanted me to keep the family close. I tried, Martha. God knows I tried. But grief does strange things to people. I clung to memories while my kids ran from them. They began visiting less, then calling less, until my days were nothing but silence broken by the ticking clock. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Sunday morning, ironic, since Sundays used to be family breakfast day. I made pancakes, just like old times, and waited for Emily and Thomas to show up. They'd said they'd come. They didn't. Instead, at around noon, my phone rang. Emily's voice was cold, businesslike. Dad, we're coming over. There's something important we need to talk about. Something about her tone made my stomach twist. An hour later, they arrived together. Thomas didn't even make eye contact. Emily stood with her arms crossed, looking around the house like it was a place she barely remembered. What's going on? I asked, wiping my hands on my apron. Emily exchanged a glance with Thomas, then said, Dad, we've been talking. You're not doing well here. You forget things. The house is too big. You need help. I'm fine, I said quietly, though I could feel my throat tightening. Thomas finally spoke. Dad, it's not safe for you to live alone anymore. You could fall, forget the stove on, anything. We found a good place, Maple Grove Home. It's clean, safe, and you'll have company. Maple Grove. The name sounded gentle enough, but my heart dropped. You're sending me to an old age home? Dad, Emily sighed, don't make it sound like that. It's not punishment. You'll have people around. You won't be lonely. Lonely. The word burned. I was lonely because they never came around. I don't want to go, I said firmly. This is my home. Your mother's home. Thomas rubbed his forehead. Dad, we already put down a deposit. They have a room ready. The words hit me like a slap. Already decided. They hadn't come to ask. They'd come to inform. Please, I whispered. At least let me stay until Christmas. Your mother loved Christmas here. But their silence told me everything. They'd already moved on. The next morning, they packed my things, without asking what I wanted to bring. I watched as strangers handled my memories. Martha's photo frame, the worn armchair where she'd read novels, the coffee mug she'd painted for me. Everything boxed away. When they dropped me off at Maple Grove, I tried to hold my head high. I smiled at the nurses, thanked them politely, and told myself it was temporary. That my children would visit. That they'd change their minds. But deep down, I knew. This was goodbye. The old age home. Maple Grove wasn't terrible. The staff was kind, the rooms were clean, and there was always the faint smell of disinfectant mixed with lavender. But it wasn't home. It was a waiting room for the forgotten. The first week, I kept checking my phone, waiting for a call. Nothing. By week 2, I told myself they must be busy. By week 3, I stopped checking. There was a woman named Grace who often sat with me in the garden. She'd been there 3 years. Her children never visited either. She said something that stuck with me. Silence can be louder than anger, Henry. Sometimes, not saying a word is the only revenge left. At first, I didn't understand. But slowly, her words began to grow inside me like a seed. I started observing the people around me, the staff, the residents, the families who visited on Sundays. Some faces lit up when their children arrived. Others, like mine, stayed neutral, pretending not to notice no one came. The nurses liked me. I never complained, never raised my voice. But at night, when the halls were silent, I cried quietly. Not for myself, but for the father I had been, the sacrifices I'd made, and the realization that none of it mattered to my kids anymore. The letter. One evening, while sorting through my few remaining belongings, I found Martha's old letter. She'd written it years ago, before she passed. In it, she'd written, "Henry, if one day you find yourself alone, don't let bitterness take your heart. Let patience guide your hand. God sees all, even the children who forget where they came from." That line changed everything for me. That night, I sat by the window and made a decision. I wouldn't confront Emily and Thomas. I wouldn't beg for love or attention. I would let silence do what anger couldn't. And when the time came, they would regret it. Over the next months, I grew quieter, calmer. But in my mind, I began building something that would remind them who their father really was. You see, what my children didn't know was that their old, lonely father wasn't as poor or helpless as they thought. Before retiring, I'd spent decades investing in small real estate projects with a friend, Richard. He handled the business side while I stayed in the background. We never told anyone, not even my kids, because Martha and I wanted them to learn independence. Over the years, those investments grew into millions. That secret had always been locked away, just paperwork in a bank vault under my name. And now, I realized how powerful that secret could be. The visit. Months passed before I saw Emily again. She walked into Maple Grove one sunny afternoon, dressed in a designer coat and holding a bouquet. "Dad," she said awkwardly, "you look well." I smiled faintly. "Do I?" She placed the flowers on my bedside table. "Thomas couldn't come. He's busy. But we wanted to check on you." Check on me. The phrase stung. As if I were a charity project. We spoke for 15 minutes, mostly small talk. Then she looked around the room and frowned. "Dad, this place, it's so small. You sure you're okay here?" I looked straight into her eyes and said quietly, "I'm fine. I've learned not to need much." Something flickered in her expression, but she said nothing more. When she left, I felt the old ache return, but this time, it didn't break me. It strengthened me. The plan. By winter, I'd finished rewriting my will. It was simple, direct, and signed with calm hands. Emily and Thomas would get nothing. Not a cent. Instead, every penny, every property, every investment would go to 2 places. Maple Grove Home, for the care they gave to forgotten souls. And a scholarship fund in Martha's name, to help children who'd lost their parents. I made sure my lawyer knew exactly what to do. And I told him one thing. When I die, make sure my children are there when the will is read. He nodded. They'll be notified immediately. That was all I needed to hear. From that day, I lived differently. Not bitter, just silent. I spoke kindly to everyone, helped others, and waited. Because I knew that time has a way of bringing people face to face with their own actions. The decline. My health began to fail a year later. Heart issues, the doctor said. I could feel my time coming. But I wasn't afraid. I'd already said my goodbye in my own way. Grace held my hand one evening as I lay in bed. "You're ready," she said softly. I smiled. "Yes. And they aren't." She laughed quietly. That's the best kind of revenge. They say time heals all wounds. But I've learned something different. Time doesn't heal, it reveals. It reveals who truly loves you, and who only loves what you can give them. When I passed away at Maple Grove, I left this world quietly, the same way my children left me, without a word. Nurse Claire said I looked peaceful. I suppose I was. Because I knew what was coming next. I had written my will carefully, every word chosen with patience, not anger. My revenge wasn't loud, it was written in ink, sealed with silence. The funeral. The funeral was small. The staff from the home came, and a few of my old friends. Emily and Thomas stood at the back, polished, distant, uncomfortable. When the service ended, I overheard Emily whisper to her brother, "At least now we can sell the house." Ah! The final confirmation I had been right about them. The reading. 2 weeks later, my lawyer, Mr. Franklin, called them to his office. I had asked him to invite Grace too, the woman who had taught me that silence can sting more than anger. The room was tense when the will was opened. Emily adjusted her pearl earrings. Thomas leaned back, smug, already calculating numbers in his head. Mr. Franklin began reading. To my children, Emily and Thomas, I leave you the lessons I once tried to teach. Kindness, loyalty, and the weight of your own choices. Since you abandoned me when I needed you most, I trust you will also abandon the wealth I leave behind. Emily frowned. What's that supposed to mean? The lawyer continued, unbothered. All my assets, including my properties, investments, and savings, are to be divided equally between Maple Grove Home and the Martha Collins Foundation, established for children who've lost their parents. For a moment, silence. Then came chaos. Emily shot up. No. This has to be a mistake. Thomas slammed his hand on the table. You let those people manipulate him. Grace's calm voice cut through the air. No one manipulated Henry. He simply gave his heart to those who cared for him when his own children didn't. That silenced them. Then, Mr. Franklin handed each of them a small envelope. Your father left you both something personal, he said. Emily's contained a family photo, the 4 of us smiling in the backyard. On the back, my handwriting said, "Once, this was love." Thomas's envelope held a small brass key and a note. For the shed behind the old house. Open it when you're ready to remember who built your first swing. The shed. That night, they drove to the old house. The garden was wild, the paint chipped, but the scent of jasmine lingered. Thomas unlocked the shed. Inside were dusty boxes labeled Dad's projects. Inside, land deeds, letters, blueprints, proof of the investments and properties I'd quietly built over the years. Thomas whispered. He was rich, and he never told us. Emily's tears fell silently. He trusted us to love him, and we didn't. For the first time in years, silence filled that house again, but it wasn't the silence of neglect. It was the silence of realization. Grace's visit. A month later, Emily visited Maple Grove. She sat across from Grace, her eyes swollen. I just want to know, Emily said quietly, was he happy here? Grace smiled sadly. He found peace, but not happiness. He missed you every day. But he forgave you long before he died. Emily lowered her head and whispered, we thought he needed comfort. He just needed us. Grace nodded. That's what he always said. Love isn't about convenience. The foundation. Months later, the Martha Collins Foundation opened its doors. A home for children without parents. On its gate was a bronze plaque. For every child who lost a parent, and every parent who was lost before their child truly saw them. Emily stood quietly at the ceremony, hidden in the crowd, tears glistening. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The final letter. Mr. Franklin delivered one last letter from me. My children. I didn't take your inheritance. I simply gave it to those who still understand love. You thought you left me behind in an old age home. but it was you who were left behind, in your own emptiness. If you ever wish to find me, visit Maple Grove. Sit on the bench beneath the oak tree. That's where I forgave you. Epilogue. A year later, the staff at Maple Grove noticed a familiar visitor. Every Sunday, she came with fresh flowers and sat silently on the old garden bench, the same one I used to sit on. Her name was Emily. She never spoke, never cried. She just sat in the same silence I once did, a silence that had finally taught her what love truly meant.